Okay, welcome everybody. We are here with, let me get my notes. We are here with Dr. Froswa Booker-Drew in this evening's event, Lessons Learned in Leading. This event is designed to inform you of the importance of building your emotional IQ and the power of relational leadership. So Froswa's desire, I'll tell you a little bit about Froswa herself. Her desire is to help individuals discover their unlimited possibilities. Her life is an example of the power of relationships and the impact of connection with God, self, and others as a critical element to our well-being and success. We are designed for community, and each of us has something within our grasp that is special and important to contribute. Froswa believes strongly in the power of our narratives and reflection, and that our identities are tied to the stories we share and believe. So thank you so much, Froswa, for being here with us, and I will hand it over to you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the introduction, Chandel. Thanks everybody that's here. So I just kind of want to have a conversation. So I'm going to pull you off mute, and I will go back and forth between slides and between our conversation. But since we're talking about leadership, I always believe that it's important to have a shared language. So when I say leadership, what does that mean to you?
Ooh.
It means taking care of the people who work for me. Whenever I've been in a leadership position, I have kind of gotten in trouble with the people I work for sometimes. I was in the Air Force for a while, and there was a big focus on taking care of the bosses. But I would defend my people. I guess I'd make a good union leader or something like that. But that was just, I loved taking care of my people. And so to me, leadership is making sure that their needs and their best interests are met, and that we make those visible to the people above us. So that's just been my philosophy.
It's about relationships.
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, always.
Okay. Thanks, Joanne. Anyone else?
So I have the queen archetype. So I kind of see it as like the making sure everyone's kind of taken care of, but you know that you're responsible for the outcome.
True.
So there's a level of accountability and responsibility that a leader has.
Yes.
For the team, but also the vision.
Right.
Okay. Thanks, Chandel.
Yeah.
Great point.
Anyone else wanna?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, for me, it's really about marking a path or a direction, and providing the tools and support to everybody who is walking that path towards the shared goal.
So the leader creates the roadmap and the vision and gives the team the resources, whether it's, as you said, tools, so I'm giving you supplies, or whether that is the emotional, mental support to be able to do it.
Right.
Okay. Thanks, Amir. Anna, what about you?
Yeah, I love that. I love the word vision, and it's kind of like you have a guiding star, and you're marching, you're marching towards that, and you're the one looking ahead, and you're always looking back, right? Always looking back into your sides to make sure that the folks that are with you on that march are are with you. And something that has been really, really cool for me in Guidely is learning the different genius zones that everyone has, and learning those little facets that people really enjoy being in, and kind of like asking questions and supporting people to dig in a little bit deeper into those. It's really fun to see how just keeping a pulse on your mission and on the people can it can create things that you didn't even know was possible. So yeah.
So it sounds like it's the balance of the people, but it's also the pulse of the work. And what you said is so important about learning your people when you talked about the genius zone and learning that with people. I think part of very good leaders, their task that they see it as being is learning their people. Because if I learn what makes you tick and what makes you excited, I can tap into that. So it's more than just the task at hand. It really is about me understanding people and their purpose and why, they are there. So all of those are, examples of leadership. But I want to ask you, so you see I'm flipping this. It's not even me presenting. I'm flipping and y'all are presenting this. This is good. So let me ask you this. When you think about leaders that were impactful in your life, who was the great leader? And what were the characteristics that they had that made them such a great leader? And then when you think about the ones who weren't so good, who may have been toxic, what was it about them that made them that way for you? And so think about those two characters and what were the characteristics for them that were impactful for you?
I need you to ask again the question for us.
Okay.
I can ask.
So I want you to think about two leaders that were very impactful, one positive and one that was negative for you. And what were the characteristics of the positive one that stood out for you? And then when you think about the one that wasn't so positive, what were the characteristics that stood out for you on that one? Y'all are really thinking. I'm seeing it.
I can answer, I think, in a way. So I would say that the characteristics of, and they're very similar. That's why I kept thinking, I was like, this is so interesting to see how so similar they are. Is the one that impacted me the most was the one who believed in me, that I had the answers within me. And the negative one is the one who expected me to have the answers when I didn't. So it's like a really interesting dynamic for me when answering this question, because they're so similar, but one was a belief and one was an expectation.
Mm.
Yeah.
So delve a little bit into that, because that's interesting.
Okay.
So the one who believed that you could do it, even if you may not have had the answers, it sounds like approach was different.
Yes. It was like, I'm there to support you as you figure this out. I'm there to stand behind you. Like, you have me if you need me, or even like, we can help do this together. It was something more like that, where I was like, okay, I know I can figure this out. I know I can do this. I have the support I need. Where the other one was like, what do you mean you don't know? And it's like very like you should know this. And it was very disconnecting and almost kind of jarring sometimes. So which then became a disbelief in myself as opposed to a belief in myself.
Wow. And it shows how leaders have such power of how we see ourselves just because of the interaction. And it's interesting, Chandel, how close both of those are, that it was one who provided support and had a very different approach versus one who didn't give the support, but had an expectation, and sounds like they didn't really communicate well what the expectation was for you.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's good.
In my case, I would say that it was communication styles that were very different and created different outcomes, because in the best case scenario, the person was clear in their instructions and had faith in my ability to not only carry them out, but to expand my skill set if necessary to carry them out, and gave me the leverage to figure that out myself and be, and I could ask questions and stuff. But he relied on me a lot. I was a second person in the office where he was managing, and he trusted me, even though I didn't have as much experience as him. He trusted me to A, figure things out, and B, come to him if needed. And he gave me clear instructions on the difference between his responsibilities and mine. In the other case, I would get blindsided by someone who wouldn't tell me what was needed until the last minute. And so I was constantly being put in a tight sort of situation to come up with something. And so that communication failed because he wouldn't tell me what he really wanted me to do until there was very little time left to pull a speech together or something like that. So,
well, and it sounds like one honored you and honored the relationship with you,
right,
and the other
right,
didn't honor your time, and as a result didn't necessarily honor the relationship. So it put you in a place where you had to save face.
right, yeah, it was hard.
That's
it was kind
hard.
of like panic.
Yeah, that's hard.
Well, one thing about the military, though, is if you wait long enough, either you get to leave or they go away.
But it's the waiting.
It's the waiting that's hard. For like 2-3 years, whoop, everything changes.
Oh, wow. But it's
Or-
getting to that.
Or you get promoted to be that kind of
Oh,
leader you
yeah,
wanna
yeah,
be.
yeah, that can happen too. Absolutely. So,
Wow.
so it's a weird kind of culture that's a little bit different than most civilian company kinds of cultures. And I only worked in the military, at an academic institution, and as a freelance editor. So I don't have any experience with corporate, really. I mean, except as they're my clients, and I've had clients who work for companies, but it's kind of a weird life experience in the workplace.
But some of that military culture has showed up in corporate America too, because you have a lot of people who actually came from military training and backgrounds. When you start looking at, the kind of history of how corporate America began, a lot of that influenced the way people lead. So the hierarchies that you see, a lot of that influences how corporate America runs, where you'll see, academia is a whole nother thing because it's got its own toxic stuff. And we do a whole series on academia and how toxic it is. But I think, for corporate America, it's had that hierarchical structure that a lot of that influence, I think, came from some of the military background that a lot of people brought to establishing that. So you don't see kind of the shared leadership structures that you may see in some of the, smaller nonprofits where they're distributing leadership. You don't see that. It's very hierarchical, which is similar to the military.
Yep, that's true.
Yeah.
So that was my experience, is different communications. Like you said, the honoring or not really honoring the subordinates' time kind of thing.
Thanks, Joanne.
One of the
Amir,
best
Hannah? Okay.
Amir?
leaders that I had was it was
Hannah.
my first nurse manager when I started under her when I was still in nursing school. I was a CNA. And she was just this bright light of a woman who had been in nursing for so long, but wasn't jaded and wasn't hardened. Like she was still very soft, very receptive. And she was just so interested in my experience and in my journey. And, would sit down, would take time out of her day, even when I was a CNA, to see how things were going, to see how dynamics on the floor were for me. And, that it worked out in the way that I had, I got a job at that floor, and I did my senior partnership there. And then I transitioned to be a new grad RN on that floor. And that's when it really, that's when our relationship deepened. And, it was consistent. Something that I really value is consistency and a feeling of safety, and just like a real investment in the journey of the human being in the larger entity of whatever organization you're working for. But I remember there was this there was an opportunity within, within the hospital to do discharge plan, like helping with discharge calls. So I would call folks after they were discharged from the hospital to see how they were doing. And, we worked together in that. And it was just a really cool, like, thank you for seeing me, and thank you for seeing my excitement about, this project or about this, adventure. So that was somebody that, that I really valued. And of course, in nursing school also, it's not always in the workforce that I see good leadership or bad leadership, right? It's in just every day, you can tell, like there's a presence that, that happens. And really it's this degree of deep and mutual respect for, for the other party, and being able to carry a vision while also seeing through the eyes of somebody different. So yeah, that's my happy leadership in as a new nurse. I loved that, especially because there's the saying that nurses eat their young, which means that like the old nurses are just terrible to new nurses, which is luckily something that I didn't experience, or that I didn't really like. It might have come at me a couple of times, but it didn't quite register. And perhaps there was an energetic communication that happened of like, no, thank you, so. But yeah, that's something that I really enjoyed and appreciated about her.
But it sounds like you said something that just resonated with me. She saw you.
Mm-hmm.
And so often in leadership, we don't see people, we see the tasks that they are to perform, but we really don't take the time to see them and see what brings them joy. And so she was invested in you.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes a difference for you to feel like, I'm valuable because you see me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So did you have a opposite experience with someone?
Yeah, I mean, there have been, times throughout my life when, when I have had struggles, and really it stems from receptivity, I think is the overarching theme of receptivity to, the degree at which I move, the amount of ideas, or, like kind of, it's like we could do this or we could do that or we could do this. And I think that sometimes there are just my communication or like communication styles can be challenging, and yeah, but at the end of the day, it's all just learning, and it's all just seeing, and still valuing what I bring. And Chandel, it resonated with me when when you were talking about kind of the experience of like how it made you feel about you in situations with challenging leadership. And I've experienced that. I'm like, well, what does this mean about me? And it's like, yes, and also I know who this is, and I know what I bring, and I know it, but sometimes I have to dig, for that. And I value those relationships as well.
Thanks, Hannah.
Yeah, thank you.
Amir.
So I'm finding myself struggling with finding a leader that I did not appreciate. I feel that every leader I've seen, I've learned from and appreciated, even if and like deeply, not just surface level. So it took me to, my brain went to Adolf Hitler. Sorry, but that's where it went. To who, when he first got elected, he really came to help poor people and the underserved population, and then leverage that to gain more and drive. And it's but he used very sophisticated and manipulation tools and charisma and created a vision that people aligned around. And when you look at, I was thinking about what Chandel, what you did, if you put, and I don't know if anybody have ever made that comparison I'm about to make, but and forgive me in advance, but if you put Dr. Martin Luther King and Adolf Hitler next to each other, one have done terrible things, and one have done some incredible, phenomenal things, and they have both came from very and used very similar approaches when you think about it. I mean, very similar approaches, and I think it's really what you do with the leadership, because it's you can have a knife in your hand, and there is a story in the Bhagavad Gita about the tree that holds a knife, and somebody, I don't know if he kills him or whatever, but he is trying to save somebody's life. But from distance, somebody sees him holding a knife against somebody else's skin, and he interprets that in his mind as a threat. So I feel like identifying and empowering people around you is definitely and creating that vision that But I want to share a story about what I believe is one of we all talk about leadership as a higher level of in the hierarchy. One of my favorite leadership stories is about a very young software engineer that used to work for me many years ago, who was not the brightest engineer we had on the team, who was not even a senior engineer on the team, who was socially challenged a little, and he came with some ideas that were very, and we developed a software at that time, and we had some contracts with big companies, and the software didn't work, and we kept getting extension and whatever, and he came up with some crazy ideas how to solve it, and nobody wanted to listen, like really nobody wanted to listen, and he started creating some. Anyway, he ended up proving his case, at least in theory, and then he was able to engage his team leader to do a small test, and then the VP R&D, and then our CTO, and then that what saved the company basically. And it was profound, because he did not do that in a way that was he wasn't non-compliant, he wasn't he still did his job and everything he was asked to do. And then in addition to that, he found a way in a very subtle and in a very, and he basically led us through and was able, actually, he then later helped us also create a totally different product. But the story was that you don't need to be at the top of the pyramid to truly be a leader.
Right.
Leadership is not something that somebody appoints you to be a leader. It's an inside out job. It's not an outside job. And then however you show up, you can be any role in a company or in the society and be a leader, or so anyway.
But it's so much in what you said. So I'm going to try to talk about quite a bit of it. So you're absolutely right. I think in our society, we get so focused on positional power. I have watched folks that are admins completely run an organization where you have to go to them to get anything done.
Absolutely.
And so people will assume it's the CEO that's in charge, and the CEO is listening to the admin. And she's telling him what to do, what not to do. I've witnessed this and it's fascinating. So it's not always the positional power that people have. It is about the way that they engage and respect and how people feel and how they make people feel. But when you talked about Hitler and King, here you have two very charismatic people. But what's very interesting is the difference in their childhoods. So, you know, Hitler had a very horrible childhood.
Right.
And there's this book that I love by this author out of Australia. Her name is Amanda Sinclair. And she has a book, it's like, the title, I always butcher it, but it's about disillusioned leadership. And she talks about the world leaders of Enron and WorldCom. And she says that these were men who had very horrible childhoods. And because they had not dealt with that, they recreated a story that ended up hurting other people. And so there's something to be said about in leadership, recognizing not only your triggers, but paying attention to your narrative and not trying to, you know, hide pieces of it, but owning the good, bad, and ugly. And I think for a lot of leaders, we often want to see them, you know, be perfect and have this image that they have it all together. And quite often leadership is messy because our lives are messy. And we have to be okay in knowing that leaders are not going to be perfect. But what happens is, in a Hitler's case, you can present that you have it all together. You're so charismatic, you're saying what people want to hear. And yet there's this other side that exists that's dark and awful that comes out and ends up hurting other people's lives. And we see that played over and over and over in leadership. And it's not something we have conversations about. It's amazing. If you Google leadership, it is one of the top things that comes up on Google that has the most hits, because it's something that people are always fascinated about. And yet it seems like we can't get it right. And we still have all these examples of the Hitlers, and we could go on and on today.
So I want to make sure I heard you right. You're saying that the difference was that so Hitler had, I know he had a very traumatic childhood, as opposed to King, who did not have
I wouldn't say that that's the sole difference in them, but I would say that that's something to note that's very interesting, because Hitler never paid attention to his childhood and actually tried to hide it and hide a lot of his history and not deal with some of the things that were part of his past that he ended up hurting other people. So I wouldn't say that that's a distinguishing factor, because it's a lot. But I think it's interesting to note how that plays a part in it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I actually, so I want to, and I don't have the exact resource, but HBR, the Harvard Business Review magazine, has incredible research that shows that most breakthrough leaders of the good to great companies, I don't know if you're familiar with the good to great, have actually come from childhood trauma.
Yes.
So the harder your childhood was, the better you ended up. And if you look at artists, or if you look at, and it's like bizarre, but and almost disturbing, but if your trauma wasn't big enough, you can't get too far.
But
right?
this is the difference, is that those are folks who recognize it. Yes.
Right.
And they recognize it, and it becomes fuel for and a foundation for who they become, versus when you totally dismiss it and don't want to deal with it.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's definite. Yeah, that's a different pattern. One of my favorite people, and I know he's an imperialist from way back, but his name is Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
And he had a very difficult childhood in a different way, plenty of money, but his parents didn't pay any attention to him. He was constantly writing them really sad letters when he was a kid about wanting them to come visit him, but he was taken care of by nannies and he was so lonely. But he took all of this and put it into, like you said, into his interest in military strategy and in politics and in being a leader in the world at a time when this particular kind of leader was needed. And he had a vision that was a vision, I guess you would say a good one overall for that particular situation. But he could have just become a useless playboy, but he didn't. So yeah, it just depends on how the person decides to take it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's what's a catalyst in that moment. You know what I mean? Because we all have these experiences that I think that are these moments that are deciding factors as to what we choose to do with our lives. And so to your point, he could have had that moment and said, yeah, you know, I'm going to be the playboy. And there are a lot of women that are available. I could do this, versus here's a time that I can use these experiences and build to do the greater good.
Yeah.
And so it comes down to almost the power of the decision, what we choose to
Yes.
do with those characteristics, and do we do them in a way that benefits others and see leadership as a way that amplifies others, or do we see it as a way to amplify our own platform and voice?
And by the way, some of those, you know, known leaders are remembered as remarkable leaders for 1, 2, or 5 actions they've taken. The rest of their journey is not to be so much proud of.
Yes.
Right.
It's the messy
Exactly.
part though, Amir. That's right. But it's the messy part that I think sometimes we want people to be perfect.
Right.
And I don't think we pay attention to the messiness that comes with leadership and just being human. I mean, if we're really honest about who we are, all of us have some great characteristics. And then there's some other things that we wouldn't want to talk about on a Zoom recorded meeting, you know? And so it's being aware of that. If that happens within us, we have to have the expectation that that's the same for other people. And that we can walk and follow those leaders if the goal is for the greater good.
You just blew my balloon of hope that we're all perfect.
Amir, you might be there.
I'm definitely not.
Amir,
I'm trying to even out the messy and the good, you know.
Well, I've just accepted the messy is hanging down really low.
Yeah.
I accept it in my own life, and that's okay. And I think that that's the thing that I don't think we spend enough time in talking about leadership and how it shapes us. One of the most powerful things I've ever done was I have my students do this at Tulane. I make them write a leadership essay from the time they were kids to now. You would be surprised how those experiences shape who you are. We never pay attention to that. We'll pay attention to relationships and, you know, what's been good, what's been bad, and I don't want that again. And we do that, but we don't always pay attention to that with the people that we're choosing to follow. There's a lot of research that's coming out now about followership. What makes someone decide to follow someone versus just looking at people that are leading? Because you make a choice to follow people. So what are the things that we need to pay attention to? Joanne, what are you thinking about that?
Oh, I just remember when I was Girl Scout in the 3rd or 4th grade, I think. 4th grade, I guess, was when we got to be Girl Scouts instead of brownies. And this thing has stuck in my head forever. I was put in some kind of leadership position, and I still remember this so clearly. And I thought the only way to be a leader was to be bossy and tell people what to do, because guess who's an eldest child of 3 siblings? Okay. And my father was in the military, and so he would tell everybody what to do. And so those were my models. So I was really bossy, and I didn't get anywhere with these girls. So the lesson that I took from that was, okay, tone it down. You're not always the person with the right answer. And it really informed my way of being a leader later on. And it was just one of those childhood things. I still look back on that and go, how formative that was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't pay attention to that. I read my students' essays, and their comments at the end are, wow, I never paid attention to how these experiences really shaped who I am as a leader, and even how I interact with people. You know, because I think about my daughter when she was about 3. I remember asking her, I said, what are you doing? She goes, I'm so busy. And I said, well, what do you mean? She goes, I have all these meetings I have to go to. Now, you know where she got that from. She was looking at her mom. So then she says, I asked her, I said, so baby, what are you doing at these meetings? She goes, I tell people what to do and I leave. And I thought, oh my God, that's what she thinks of me. Is that part of my leadership role was people were coming to me and asking me for help about something. I would tell them something, they go, and that was her thing. She's like, I got 1,000 meetings and I tell people what to do. And I go, and I'm like, oh God, I've got so much work to do. But it really shows how very young you are already picking up these ideas about leadership and relationships, very young, as to what you see people doing. And so as kids, we think it is telling people what to do and giving directives, because we're being told all the time what to do.
Yeah.
And because of that, we grow up believing that that's what leadership is, and it's not. It's so much more than that. And all of you have said these and given all these wonderful examples of what leadership is. So why is it so hard for it to happen? If we all agree on these characteristics of great leaders, why is it such a problem? Why does it not happen at the level that it could?
Fear.
Is Brene Brown in the waiting room? Because it just ever since you were talking about it's like the most Googled, it's everybody Googles this, but we can't seem to figure it out. And it's like culturally, we're not comfortable being vulnerable because we think that we have to be that we have to be perfect, or that we have to appear a certain way, or that we have to know everything. And it's like, people are terrified of not having the answer or not knowing something, and they're not willing to rumble in vulnerability, as she would say, let's rumble, let's go, I want to know, where is there some insecurity that's creating this dynamic that's challenging, right? And where within myself am I scared to to drop into vulnerability, or to be empathetic in in a situation where I feel frustrated. It's like people just aren't, culturally, we're not there yet, although we're working on it. And I think that we're making really great progress to being able to show up in vulnerability with empathy and compassion for ourselves and the people who are sitting around the table with us, and just imagine how far we could get when we're all sitting in that shared space, and being able to really, hear each other, be heard ourselves, and, not have to put up a facade of perfection, or we know what's going on, because oftentimes we don't. It's like the biggest thing that I've learned about adulthood is oh, nobody actually knows what they're doing here. I thought I was gonna be an adult, and then I was gonna have stuff figured out. And it's that's not
no. You'll get in your 50s and you're still going, huh.
What exactly is going on here? Because I have no idea.
It doesn't end.
Nope.
Right. It's just wonderful.
But Hannah, you made me think about, there's a lot around this ideal of authentic leadership, and that's what you described, is that authentic leaders are willing to be vulnerable. Authentic leaders, now again, there are boundaries, because sometimes people's authenticity is a bit too much. So not telling people a toilet paper brand that you use, that you don't have to get to that level of being so vulnerable and sharing, because some people tell a bit more than it's oh, I didn't need to know all that. But authentic leadership really is about a leader embracing who they are, but giving the space for the people that they're with to also show up in the totality of who they are as well. And I think it does go back to, how do we create spaces for people really to show up so that they can perform and be the best that they can be, and trust that they will do it. It may not be the way that we do it, but it's going to get done because we've created the space for that.
Yeah.
So any other thoughts on, so why doesn't it happen? If we all know what we need for leadership to be effective, why is it such a problem?
Well, I think Hannah's right about the cultural thing, because when you were talking, Froswa, I was thinking about one of the problems we had in my career field in the military was intelligence. And in my case, it wasn't about interrogating people or anything like that. I was just a briefer. I gave speeches. and told people what the enemy's weapons were like, and told air crews, what's going on in the quote enemy territory, all exercise related. When I was there, there were no hot wars when I was in. But I had lost a fiance when I was still in college, and I never got all of the counseling I probably needed to get through that a little quicker. And so I was still dealing with that. And when I got into the military, and there was also another guy who worked for me at one point as an instructor, who also had problems. And we were scared to death to tell anybody about anything like that. We would lose our positions and stuff. We had very sensitive information we were privy to, but instead of allowing us to be vulnerable and healing the thing, which would have actually improved the security situation, there was this culture of, no, you have to be tough and not deal and just keep going, because otherwise you're going to lose your job. So that was one of the cultural things specific that I ran into that created this, you can't, Hannah, you can't be free to be vulnerable. And I think that causes quite a lot of the problems, like you were saying, that people have in actually making that kind of holistic, if I would put it that way, leadership work.
That's good. Anyone else? Chandel,
I
Amir?
feel like it kind of goes back to the hierarchy. One person, having to follow the one person's views or visions or anything, and not allowing the space for more or newness. Like, you toe the line, you kind of do what you're here to do. And so people get pinned in boxes.
Yes.
Yep.
And that's a lot of weight when you think about it.
Yeah.
That one person is expected to carry and show up and have it all together. And so you really don't get to tap into the creativity and the talents of your whole team, because you're expected to be everything. That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Amir.
I don't know. I'm not sure that I think we have a global crisis in leadership when we think about it in terms of what we used to perceive leadership as. Because we wanted somebody to draw a vision for us, or we wanted somebody to tell us, and to provide us. And I think we're living in a time where, you talked about followers, why do people follow? Because they look at, you have a cool Instagram account. I want to do what she does. I want to be Froswa. Or I want to, right? I want to live that lifestyle, or be heard and followed. And so I don't know that, I feel that we're in that transition of, and we had seen that, several times in the past couple of years, of seeing, and within companies and within societies, locally and globally, how people really choose differently and voice their opinions. So I don't know. I don't know that there is such. Again, I would love to see better leadership always and at all levels. And there is leadership. It's not, the highest quality or standard, but part of that is, when I look at the leader that I don't necessarily align with, I also know that he carries with himself his own trauma and his own drama and his own survivability mode. He just happened to leverage that to the level that he was able to walk into the White House or whatever other role. And now we all get to share his gift, right? If you will. So I don't know. I feel like it's a maturity process. I know I'm rambling a little bit, but I'm not sure that
No, you really made me think about, sometimes we see leadership as being so individualized. It's about the person. And I don't think we recognize the impact that it has on community. And so leadership has often been seen as an isolation. And what you're making me really think about is leadership is really about the collective. And for some reason, we don't focus on that as much as we focus on the individual and what they will do for everyone. But if they aren't well, then all of us are impacted.
So absolutely. I mean, if you go again back history, times of kings, queens, appointed, leaders, whether it's religious leaders, spiritual leaders, country leaders, it's definitely okay. Sorry. So it's definitely an appointed person to lead something and to be that role model that they get the manual with a manuscript of how you should be, right? I've looked at a couple of movies about how the Dalai Lama, is being groomed to become the Dalai Lama. I mean, he's basically, his reincarnation of whatever, but he also get educated about the manual of how to act as, a spiritual leader. Beautiful, and I follow and love, his leadership, but it's also something. So there is an appointed individual, and I feel like we're in this process of a collective that is kind of becoming more vocal and looking for a better representation. At the end of the day, it's really a reflection of who we are, right? If we're in a phase of mirroring, so we end up getting whatever we want to project, right? So.
Yes. Any other thoughts?
I would say that perhaps a focus on, and this is something that I think Guidely can take leadership in, is fostering our own inner leadership. Because people, one of the things that I've learned in the spiritual work that I've done over the years is the importance of having your own independent discernment about whether a spiritual leader is resonant with what you think. You don't necessarily have to give up all of what you believe or think is right or whatever to follow someone. And we have lots of examples of where people just mindlessly followed somebody and got themselves into all kinds of interesting adventures. And the ability to, because it's going to be subjective. People are by definition, people have subjective experience by being here. So there's no real objective way to make those decisions about, is this a good guru or a bad guru? And that's also, I think, true for when you're working for a company. Do you want to work for Elon Musk or not? And his culture? Is it resonant with how you think, and to let followers know that they are empowered?
Yes.
That there are always options. And they don't need to be job scared necessarily. I understand the concerns that somebody can have, but there's a way for us to open our minds as well as our hearts to see what works for us in terms of working for other people and knowing if someone else has our best interests at heart or not. And a lot of people don't know. They'll say, oh, goody, I don't have to make decisions anymore. But that can create problems.
Yes. Well, you're giving away your power.
Well, but it's really, as we know, it's really, really easy to do that.
Yeah.
it's the kind of the easy way out. So being able to empower people to make their own decisions about who they want to work for
Yes.
is
But Joanne,
probably good for the collective. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, but you're making me think too. I often tell young people that when they're getting ready to interview for jobs, that you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you.
Oh.
And that you need to know what's important for you in a workplace, because you're going to be a part of a culture. And all workplaces have a culture. And you have to decide, just as they're looking to see if you're fit, you have to decide if that's a place that's going to be a fit for you. And I often tell them, and this is like one of my leadership lessons, is know your non-negotiables. I think so much we focus on, I want this, and we don't focus enough on, I don't want to be in this kind of space. Because if you don't have that, in my opinion, you're apt to get a whole lot of other stuff that you didn't pay attention to. And so I'm often saying, what are the things that you do not want to tolerate in a workplace and a supervisor, so that you're being intentional and you can direct your questions in such a way, you may not get all of those answers, but you can direct your questions in such a way that you can begin to, scrape the surface of getting some of what you need to make a decision. And you're right, it's helping people to not look to leaders to tell them what it is, but to pay attention to everything is within them, and that they just have to decide how they want to use it and what works for them.
Right.
What it really means is that who is the inside leader?
Yeah.
Because the
Yeah.
leadership, we tend to look at it as an external.
Yep.
And it's within.
Well, we're just a few minutes to the hour, so is there anything you want to make sure we know before we leave?
I am so grateful that y'all were my co-presenters tonight.
It's super fun. I love doing it this way.
You all were fabulous co-presenters. Thank you so much. If I had a check that I could write to give to you, I will. But I want to read you this final thought. This is my favorite quote in the world. And it says, go to the people, live with them, love them, learn from them, work with them, start with what they have, build on what they know. And in the end, when the work is done, the people will rejoice and will say, we have done it ourselves, not the leader.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. Awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So thank you all.
Can you
Thank
share
you,
with us
François.
that text so we can maybe reflect on it?
I was just going to ask, would you be willing to post that in the community? Because I think that would be wonderful.
Yes, I will share that.
Okay.
Cool.
Wonderful.
Well, thank y'all
everybody.
so much. Y'all
Have a
were wonderful.
evening.
Oh, thank you, François. It's good to meet you.
Being here. I'm going to stop the recording.